We had a bit of a situation in the garage. Shoes kept on piling up, and we didn't really have anywhere to put them. I wasn't a fan of the setup, so I decided it was time for a change. Today I'm going to show you how to build this quick and easy organization shelf. We're going to use the shelf as a shoe shelf in this case, but I'm going to give you an example of something else you can use it as later. To start, grab a stud finder and mark out the location of two different studs. We're going to mount our shelf hardware to these studs in just 1 second. And to build the shelf hardware, you're going to need the following: 6 3-inch galvanized pipes, 4 45-degree elbows for the pipes, 4 pipe flanges, and all this hardware is going to be 3/4 of an inch in diameter. For the shelf itself, I used a 92-inch 2x6. I started off by marking the halfway point, and in my case this was at about 46 inches. To make sure my cut was straight, I held a speed square against the board and then lined up my circular saw with the line. After that, I wanted to make sure both of my boards were the same length, so I lined them up on the opposite side and then I cut off any excess on this side. I double checked to make sure my boards were the same size, and then I got started with the next step. Next, I glued up the two boards with some wood glue. This part's super easy. You just have to put some wood glue between the two boards and make sure it's spread nice and evenly. And with the help of some clamps, I was able to hold these together overnight while they dried up. Since we had to wait for our wood glue to dry anyway, we can start cleaning our hardware. The pipes sometimes come with a bit of oil on them, so it's a good idea to clean them with rubbing alcohol before painting them. Our pipe hardware is going to look something like this, and since you're going to use 2 of the 45-degree elbows, that's going to make a 90-degree angle. And the setup for these arms is super easy. You're going to start by attaching a 3-inch pipe to each of the pipe flanges. After that, attach one of the 45-degree elbows to each of those pipes. Last but not least, you're going to use the last pipe to join both of those. You want to make sure that everything's tight, but you will have room to make adjustments later on if you need to. Now we're going to use Rust-Oleum's flat soft iron metallic paint. Since all our pieces are different colors, this is an easy way to make a match while giving them adequate protection. When spray painting, you want to move in light passes. Try not to hold the can in the same place. Try to give your hardware a few thin layers of the paint at a time. I gave mine 3 different coats, and I waited about 15 minutes in between each coat. It's probably a good idea to look over your hardware and make sure that you can't see the original color anymore. Next, we're going to use Rust-Oleum's satin clear enamel to give this a layer of protection. I treated this the same way and waited 15 minutes between coats. The next day, after my boards were dry, I started sanding them to make them smooth. I even had a chance to use the pencil trick. The way this works is you draw some lines on the board and you keep sanding until all those lines are gone. That's going to make sure that you're sanding the board evenly. As far as the sandpaper goes, I started with 120, then moved to 180, and ended at 240 grit sandpaper. And I did the pencil trick between each of these layers just to make sure that I sanded properly. Now's a great time to round off some of those sharp edges. Your shins will thank you later. And with the board in perfect condition, we can start staining. I used Verithane's Early American Wood Stain, and I've rubbed this on with a piece of cloth. Once your board is covered in stain, you can wipe it off with a clean cloth and it should look something like this. I gave that half hour to dry completely, and then I applied Verithane's water-based polyurethane. I really like this product because it starts off white to let you know which areas have been covered, and after it dries, it goes back to looking like the natural wood. I gave this a few layers with the foam brush, and then I let that dry for a couple of hours. And in the meantime, I used my stud locations to start setting up my shelf hardware. Make sure you're aligning the pipe flanges in a way where 2 of the screws can vertically get drilled into the stud. Setting this up deliberately will give you the most strength. Another important step is making sure that your 2 pipe flanges are level with each other. I did this by grabbing a straight piece of wood, I put it over the 2 pipe flanges and made sure that they were level with each other. This part is optional, but it might actually be easier for you to set this up if you detach the rest of the hardware and just leave the pipe flange. You could always just twist it back on later on anyway. Next, I started working towards attaching the actual shelf. To center this perfectly, I made sure that there was an equal amount of distance between the pipe to the edge of the shelf on both sides. When the shelf was perfectly positioned, I started securing the screws using the pipe flange. I used screws that were 3/4 of an inch in this case, just so it wouldn't go through the wood. And of course on the wall I just used standard drywall screws. And I'll give you a fair warning here, this shelf is super strong. I weigh about 250 pounds or 113 kilos, and the shelf didn't even move with my weight on it. It passed the strength test, and that was the last step in my book, so that means we're all done. Given that the shelf is so strong, that provides a lot of use cases for it. This next part's a little hypothetical, but suppose you move it up 4 or 5 feet. That means that you might actually be able to use it as a standing desk. And because this attaches to the wall, That means that you have a little bit more flexibility with the space. You can put this in a crowded room and it won't affect any of the floor space. I'm not saying you should use it as a desk, I'm just saying it's a possibility. But for now, I'll use it as I intended.